Here we go. We're going to start. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my strength and my redeemer. And tonight, God is going to pay our debts. So get them ready. He starts by talking about the Lord's Prayer. And in the Lord's Prayer, forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Exactly. And that's not begging God, please forgive our debts. If we forgive our debtors, that is, you will forgive our debts when we forgive our debtors. And if we're holding any resentment or any unforgiveness, we're not able to receive anything from Spirit. We can't receive that cleansing power and that spiritual substance that is standing ready to give. It wants to give, but we can't because we've got a block up. And we put that block up through unforgiveness or through holding a resentment. And we also do it through fear, through doubt, or if we're focused on lack. When we are in any of those states of mind, there is no room for truth, for the true thoughts, for the thoughts coming from Spirit, the things coming from the one mind. Fillmore says that thoughts are things and they take up space. So we talked the other day about, I said that when I went to school, nouns were persons, places, or things. And now everybody learns they're persons, places, things, or ideas, because we know that ideas are things. And he says, and he was saying this back in the 1911s, and he says that they're things. They take up room. They have space. They take up room in our minds. And when any negative thought is in our mind, it's taking up the space that those positive things, those things that we want to focus on, don't have room for. And of course, we know that any thought held in mind produces after its kind. So not only do we have our storage area, with a box of negativity, but that box of negativity breeds another one. And so then we're shoved full of all of this stuff that we don't want. And that's why we have to be careful about what we think. Fillmore says, thoughts are alive and endowed by us with a secondary power. The thoughts the Creator thinks assume an ego and begin to think on their own account. So what he's saying there is everything is one. We are from the Creator. We're image and likeness beings, but we also have that ego. So the ego begins to think then. And in Course in Miracles terms, we forget our oneness and begin to live out of that ego, trying to separate ourselves from our source. And we think that by separating ourselves from our source, we're unique and we're doing all these wonderful things. But actually what we're doing is taking up room in our minds that need to be directed towards that source, directed towards our sonship, if you will, directed towards our divinity, so that we can be in line with that original source and not have those secondary thoughts. Because when we're in line, Janie and I were talking about this before we started. When we are in line with our divinity, when we're thinking original thoughts from the Creator, they're permanent. But we spend a lot of time in those secondary thoughts that have no permanence, but we build them up and build them up and build them up and look at them as if they are really something. And that's any time that we're not thinking love, we're not thinking unity, we're not thinking oneness, we're not thinking what Paul says, think on these things. What is pleasurable, what is good, what is honorable, all of those things. Then we're thinking those secondary thoughts. But the power that we give to our thoughts, that's those secondary thoughts, is what Fillmore calls them, can be withdrawn anytime we want to. All we have to do is repent. We have to change our minds. And that's why we need to think about what we think about. Because I know for me, I can get wrapped up in a bunch of stuff out there. and be all tangled up in it before I even realize that it's got me in this net, that now I'm just completely wrapped up in it and think, oh, okay, how am I going to get out of this one? Because I've bought into all of those secondary thoughts and bought into other people's. And I get wrapped up in their dramas. And then I start thinking, along those lines, watching the news, hearing other people talk about how bad things are. My boss loves to lament how people won't work and how terrible things are now and how awful it's going to be for the next period of time until things are the way that he thinks they ought to be. And he likes to talk about that. And so I have to be careful when he comes into my office that I don't get on that train. Excuse me. That I don't get on that train and buy into those things with him and just let him talk, because I'm not going to change his mind. Mm. He's convinced that this is the way things are and that people won't work and nobody has a work ethic anymore. And even today I said, well, some people do. I do. Well, you do. And I do, but the younger people don't. And it's like, okay. Got it. You're not going to be convinced. And
you admit the right young people.
Right. And I'm not going to let you convince me of yourself, but I'm not going to try to change you. So I have to be very careful about what I'm thinking and what I'm allowing into my reality at that point. So Fillmore says that if we hate and if we distrust others, then we don't have a place for love, because those opposing thoughts can't coexist. There's not room in our minds for those two oppositional thoughts. But when we focus on love and trust, we find them to be powerful. And Fillmore says they're magic and dynamic. All we have to do is change that hate and distrust to love and trust, and magic occurs. And things start moving and happening. He says that they're vital powers that build protective walls of love and substance around us that guard against negativity. So, talking about my boss again, if I allow him to say whatever he wants to say and just hold him in love and allow him to be who he is, and trust that I'm protected, that I'm fine, that the things that are true for him are not true for me, then I'm holding him in love and I am guarded and protected from that negativity that's coming from him without having to change him. I'm not saying I do that every time, but if I do, that's what happens. So we have to be careful not to be judgmental. We can't judge the guilt or innocence of anyone else. I can't judge his guilt for thinking that way. I have to forgive everybody of their transgressions, including myself, because I make a few. And when I do that, my mind becomes clear and my indiscretions can be forgiven by me and by others. But it's not any of my business whether they're forgiving me or not. The only work I have to do is with myself and my divinity. And I know that when I have forgiven myself and others, then I am forgiven. Then I am washed clean. Then I am redeemed. Whatever word or words that you've heard to describe being saved or redemption happens in our minds and through ourselves. We're only doing that ourselves because it's a relationship between us and our divinity, because that's where God is. That's where that redemptive power comes from. So we have to take care to remember those things. I'm not trying to impress anyone out there. I'm not trying to impress Mickey as my minister or Adrian Rogers or whomever. It's an inside job, and it always is. Salvations of the mind, absolutely. When you get right with your thoughts, then you're right in your heart and you're right with your divinity. It's exactly what it is. Excuse me. We have to release all thoughts of error and deny the tendency to dwell on guilt, because we all have that tendency. Oh, if I'd only done this differently. Oh, if I'd only not thought that. And that's water under the bridge. That's gone. So what we have to do is practice forgiveness. I didn't do it the way I wish I had, but I'm forgiven. And from this point on, I do better. We have to, he says, assert that past errors have no power over us because we've resolved to do better. And we have nothing in common with guilt. We have nothing in common with guilt. It's counterproductive. It serves no purpose. When we focus on those past mistakes, again, we're taking up that room in our minds that we should be using to affirm the truth and to get in line with spirit and to clean house and to start thinking as we should think. And the same goes for thinking about debt, ours or anybody else's. If we owe or if we're owed, when we think about those things, thoughts and mind are going to produce after their kind. So we're going to get more of what we're focusing on. So if we think, I don't know how I'm going to pay this bill, if we think, I wish those people would pay me back because then I could use, we're focusing on what we don't have. And that's what we don't want. So we have to forgive ourselves for our debts and forgive others for their indebtedness to us. And that doesn't necessarily mean writing off the money or the apology or whatever you think is owed to you. That's not saying, okay, I'm not going to pay my mortgage and you don't have to pay me whatever you owe me because I'm in this prosperity class and I know that I have to write off these debts. Excuse me. What it means is that we have to deny in our minds that anyone owes us anything. We are not owed anything save love. We don't owe anything except love. That is all we have to give and all that we have to receive. And we have to affirm that supply is in the consciousness of the omnipresent abundance that Spirit gives us everywhere, all the time. And it's owned in common. It's not mine. It's not yours. It's not hers. It's not his. It's ours. The substance that we've been talking about for the last 7 weeks is owned by everyone. And it's the only thing there is. And it's the only thing that we can possess and own is that substance. He says that debt only exists in the mind and it has to be liquidated in the mind. Because when you get down to brass tacks, when you get down to the very crux of it, if we believe what we're saying here, that God is all and God provides this substance for us and we have everything that we need, then we know that we can't want for anything, need anything, and no one else can either. So how can you owe someone or how can they owe you? Because you've already got everything that you could ever have. At this very moment, we have everything that we could ever have because of where we are in our consciousness. Now, when we change that consciousness, we may gain more and we will gain more because as our consciousness changes, we either gain or lose. We think about, concentrate on, manifest those things that are in our mind. What's taking up space, those ideas in our minds, that's what's going to come to us. So we can't owe anyone, we can't have a debt except in our minds. And he says that's where it's got to be liquidated. That's where our work is. So any thought of this is mine, that's yours, what you have, I can't have. If you win, I lose, has to be gotten rid of, because what that is doing is generating more debt for us. Because we're thinking in terms of a limited supply. And when you think of limited supply, then you're thinking about debt.
We say it every Sunday, God is all, both visible and invisible, one presence, one mind, one power is all. That's substance.
That is substance, and that's all there is. And he says, anytime, I love this, anytime that we think of death, we're going to find the thought of lack behind it. Whether you owe me or I owe you, if we're thinking about that, there is a thought of lack, because debt is that thought of lack with an absence at both ends. The creditor thinks that they lack what is owed them, and the debtor thinks that they lack what's needed to be paid to pay off the debt. So he says there's error at both ends and nothing in the middle. You owe me, so I'm in need, I'm in lack because you haven't given me what you owe me. Or I owe you and I don't have enough to give you. And so that's an error thought in both sides. And what's in the middle? Nothing. Except when you look at it in truth, all that is the middle. Everything you could ever want, everything you could ever need. And to get past that, both the debtor and the creditor have to fill their minds with that substance that we've been talking about, that substance of abundance that is the opposite, the direct opposite of lack. Because if we agree that we're provided with everything we need, that in the ethers is this substance that we build from, that we take out of the air and mold it and make it into what we need, then we have to know that there is nothing owed. There's nothing there. So when we begin to think that way, we think abundance and we're open to receive so much more than we are when we think about people paying off what they owe to us. So if we just open ourselves to that abundance and know that everyone is in abundance, that frees people to discharge their debts. That frees people to pay what they owe. And even if they don't, they weren't going to anyway. So what is the point of thinking about how much they owe you? Seriously. I mean, everybody in business knows you got to write off a certain amount because there's going to be people that don't pay. There's always going to be that. So why sit around and worry about it? The thing to do is to bless them and to say, I see you as wealthy. I see you as prosperous. Because when you're wealthy and prosperous, truly wealthy, truly prosperous, then you don't owe anybody. Because you're responsible with your funds and you discharge your debts. So when we see abundance everywhere and we affirm it for ourselves and others, especially those who owe us money or owe us an apology or whatever we think they may owe us, that their time, they just don't give me enough of their time. I just want more time with you. I need, I don't have it. And you owe it to me. When we get rid of those thoughts and we just bless those people, then that helps them pay us more easily than if we simply wrote off the debt and said, never mind, you don't owe me anymore. Because when we do that, we're still holding a little resentment. Okay, I'm going to write this off and I'm going to write it off on my taxes. I'll get a little bit back because I can say, they didn't pay me. And so the government will make me pay less taxes because you didn't pay so there's that little kernel of resentment there. So you've really done nothing except taken up room in your mind with a thought that's not productive, that's counterproductive. He says that God's love sees us well, happy, and abundantly provided for, but God's wisdom demands that order and right relation exist in our minds before it becomes manifest in our lives. So it's already there. And it's the will, it's the Father's good pleasure to give us the kingdom. But with the caveat that we have to be prepared for it. We have to be able to accept it. And in order to accept it, we have to have righteous thinking and living. We have to think rightly. We have to find and eliminate all worry and all thoughts of lack in order to fix any dis-ease, whether it's mental, physical, or financial. Because worrying and all of those negative thoughts are the original cause. And when we free our minds of that burden, when we free our minds of that debt, when we free our minds of the thought of owing or being owed, then the debt can be paid and it can be received. But not until we do that, not until we release it, not until we turn it loose and bless it.
You're setting up for a really rich, just a now moment,
Mhm.
let everything be. And that in itself is enough.
Right. Because in this now moment, you don't need any money. You don't need to pay a bill. You don't need anything. You've got everything that you need right here, right now.
Well, there's no resentments, and there's peace of mind, and there's space between the thoughts, and the substance would be here. And the faith, and that's gonna do its job.
If you're living right, there is. Or we could all be sitting here miserable, thinking about what we need to do when we leave here, and what people owe us and what we owe, and how are we going to pay this? And oh my God, here comes another problem. And then we're up in that space that we don't want to be
Yeah,
in.
it's right-minded, wrong-minded, he's setting us up so we can just go into a moment of time and be free,
Mm-hmm,
and just experience it as it really is, not as we created it.
mm-hmm.
Continually do that.
And here he reminds us that we owe nothing but love, and nothing but love is owed to us. And that helps us when we remind ourselves of that, that helps us to counteract any thoughts that are coming in about debt or lack or need or want. And then when we think, I only owe love and I'm only owed love, then we get in the flow of that divine love that is ours, that belongs to us. And the only debt that we owe with divine love is to give it away. So when we're receptive to this love that is we're bombarded with constantly, it's all around us. When we're accepting of that, when we fully cooperate with that law of forgiveness in all of our thoughts, all of our words, and all of our actions, then we renew our health. Then we renew our faith. Then we renew our integrity. Then we renew our belief in the fact that we have everything we need in this now moment. And that we will have tomorrow's bread. We are in the midst of that abundance, and we can recognize it. He says, by acknowledging that we owe only love, we deny the burden of debt and we deny the burden of lack. And we don't, by doing that, we don't naively claim that we don't have a financial obligation. We simply deny those wrong thoughts of lack, impatient desire, and covetousness. Those things that get us impatient for, I need it and I need it right now. And everybody else has it. And if they've got it, I need it and I want it. So when we start denying those thoughts and realizing that there's nothing to them and that they're taking up that space in our minds that should be devoted to love, that should be devoted to peace, that should be devoted to these things of the spirit, then we trade those negative thoughts for thoughts that are worthy of our higher selves, thoughts that are worthy for our fellow human beings, and thoughts that are worthy of the divine, because those other ones aren't. when we're in that mindset of need, lack, you've got it, I want it, we're not serving anyone. We're miserable. We're making people around us miserable. Those thoughts aren't worthy. They're not those things that Paul talked about. We want to focus on those things. And when we condemn or criticize others, that just works against us. That keeps that space in our mind full of mess that we don't want perpetuated in there. We have to fill our minds with love, justice, peace, and forgiveness in order to pay our true debts, those of Because if we're thinking those negative things, remember, there's no room for those polar opposites. We've got to think on those things that are beautiful, that are lovely, that are about love, so that we can pay our debt. And when we pay our love debt, he says it's interesting how quickly and easily and naturally our other obligations are met. Our minds become harmonious, and divine love frees us of those burdens that we thought we had. It makes our lives and affairs happy and healthy and harmonious and free, and it brings to us what is truly ours. And that's everything that we need and want, and it comes in the form of love. That is the fulfillment of the law. And he says that the way is open for us to pay our debts by surrendering them to God along with our doubts and fears. So when we give all of that up, we get what we deserve. The power and love and wisdom of God are within us and ready to take dominion over our lives as soon as we let it. God fills the void. And so we open that space by becoming receptive, and then it is filled. It's filled with that divine love that is the substance of everything. So when we do that, we can meet every thought that we have, all of those insidious thoughts that come to us, the yeah buts, we can meet those with wisdom and courage and know that we have everything that we need because we've surrendered to that allness, to that oneness. And we start by giving thanks for what we have right now. We begin to free ourselves from that burden of debt, and those thoughts that keep us in that debt burden. And we open ourselves to increase, to good opportunities, to wisdom, to good judgment, to being open to our good, for those things to come to us. Not necessarily people to pay off their debts. We don't care where it comes from, because we know ultimately that it's all the same thing. But if we hold an idea of where it should come from, or what is supposed to happen, or really you owe me, or you should have, I need $500, and it just turns out that Linda owes me $500, so I'm waiting on her to pay me, then we're on the wrong track. Because we need to be open to that 500,000 that's coming from we don't know where. Except we really do, because it's coming from source. There's only one place that it comes from. So when we bless those that owe us with thoughts of abundance for them, bless you, Linda, you owe me $500, and I know that you're abundant and rich, and you are the rich child of a wealthy father, then we open up a space to receive from them. But if I'm holding in mind that debt, then that's what I'm going to get back, is more of that, and I don't want it. So we have to cultivate those genuine feelings of love and respect for anybody that we previously thought owed us something. And again, it might not be money. It might be time. It might be an apology. but we have to open a love center for them. And in spite of appearances or prior thoughts, send that love and respect to them and help them prosper, which in turn will help them meet their financial obligations, whether it's to us or somebody else, or it's none of our business. But what our business is to love and to put it out there. We owe a debt of love to all of our debtors. We owe a debt of love to everyone. He says that the world cannot be free from bondage or the bondage of debt until we all do the work in our minds to erase it from the consciousness.
So we owe it to ourselves.
Absolutely. And we owe it to the race, because there is a huge race mind idea of lack and debt. And there was even more so when he was writing this, because he was writing during the Depression. When the race mind of the country was so engrossed in that the whole country was in a depression. But we can only control what's in our minds. We can't control what's out there. And it's our work to do to make our little corner of the world debt-free by realizing that there is no debt, that nobody owes us anything, and we don't owe anyone anything except love. We have to forgive that error thought. So we can't say, oh yeah, it's because, race mind and it's terrible. And no, that's got to be forgiven too. Because if we don't forgive it, then we're holding a resentment against it in our minds and we're perpetuating it. So that's one of the things that I have to work on is blame, even if it's not a person, if it's an entity. You can say traditional religions blame the devil. You could blame race mind, you could blame the ego, but it's still blame. You're still putting out there, judging something, and it's got to all come back here to repent. That's an error thought. That's got to be erased. Excuse me, because if we continue to hold those error thoughts, then we get what we're holding. So if we're holding an error thought of a debt being owed, then we're going to get more debt. Whatever that is that we're focusing on. So we have to fill our minds with the consciousness of divine abundance and love, because we know that that is everywhere. And when we realize that, then it becomes manifest. Otherwise, we're working against ourselves. Mm-hmm. And that's all it is a postponement, because it's going to.
Well, then they pay me the $500.
Mm-hmm.
You take cash or check?
Just won't do it for me.
That's right. You're right, because it's very short-lived.
That's not what it was.
Yeah, that wasn't it, because then PJ owes it to you, or Penny made you mad. Yeah. Yeah, because all of that work has to be done in our heads to realize that we have everything that we need right now. So we have to get rid of that selfish acquisition to that wanting mind, that the Buddhist, what do they call it? Is it the wanting? Lean forward, turn on your camera. I mean, your thing. What is it? What mind is it?
The wanting mind.
Yeah, it's that wanting mind where it's always something out there. It's always
And
something else to grab for.
And
What?
they depict it with a a fat belly and a
Mhm.
little bitty mouth.
Yeah.
And
So
it wants something all the time.
you can't get enough in there. You can't get
Mhm.
enough. And that's what Art was saying. Yeah, that's a Buddhist saying, is that wanting mind, is that it's always looking for something else. Where's the next pleasure coming from? Where's my next pleasure? Where's my next pleasure?
Yeah, but it's not denial of desire. Desire is not a bad
I
thing.
can't hear.
No, he said it's not a denial of desire, because desire is not a bad thing, and it's not, because desire means of the sire, of the father. When we're truly desiring something, what we're desiring is to be closer to our divinity. That's what desire is. But we cover it up with these.
So, yeah, the wanting mind it's like, you know, got to have great weather, got to have the best clothes, got to have this, got to have that, and you have all that, and then you go, wait, there's something over here, I got to have, and it's just never satiated.
It's never enough, because yeah, exactly. And it's never satisfied, because it's grabbing for things. It doesn't know what it's searching for, and what it's searching for is that love, that unity with the divine. And when we get rid of that selfish acquisition, and we affirm that there is a universal supply that is always available and never expended, it's always going to be there. When we do that, we are in the kingdom of heaven. And Fillmore says there are no creditors or debtors in the kingdom. There's no such thing. We're not burdened with those thoughts of debt, because under divine law, there's no such thing as reaching for things beyond our means, because we realize the ever increasing rich supply that conforms to our inner working. And we're not that grasping for what makes us feel good, like chasing that high for, the first time you feel good after you have a drink, or the first time after you take a drug, and then you're chasing that high from then on. That's that wanting mind. That's that one that's always reaching for, there's something out there. There's something I'm looking for. Excuse me. And what it actually is that unity with the divine. And when we realize that, then we're free of debt. Then we're at peace. Then we realize that we have everything that we need right here, right now, in this now moment. But we have to think of only what we want to demonstrate, and never of the things that we want freedom from. So we can't think about debt. We can't think about illness. We can't think about all of those other things that we spend a lot of time in our heads thinking about, because all we're doing is taking up that space. Those thoughts are things, and they take up room, and we're taking up the room that we need to think about peace, to think about love. Fillmore says that we should say the following affirmations. One is, I am no longer anxious about finances. God is my all sufficiency in all things. Excuse me. And the second one is, the spirit of honesty, promptness, efficiency, and order is now expressed in me and in all I do. The superabundance of the riches of the Christ mind are mine now, and I am prospered in all my ways. I love that one. The spirit of honesty, promptness, efficiency, and order is now expressed in me and all I do. The superabundance of the riches of the Christ mind are mine now, and I am prospered in all my ways. If we believed that, if we said that every day or every 5 minutes until we believed it, then we would all be happy, healthy, wealthy, and wise. And I have almost made it all the way through.
Well, I'm groovy except for being prompt.
You're getting better, though.
Yeah.
You're much better than you used to be. So the questions from this chapter are really, really good. The first one is, what law of mind is observed in true forgiveness?
What?
What law of mind is observed in true forgiveness? Well, it is all of those things. He says, when we say, forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors, that is an infallible law of mind. The law that we have to dissolve one idea before another idea can take its place. It's where we were talking about they take up space. So we can't say that we want to be forgiven or to forgive ourselves and hold animosity for someone else. We can't say that we love God and hate other people. It can't happen because those two things can't be in the same place at the same time.
You can be loving, you can only be loving more fearfully. You can be both.
That's exactly right. And if we have any thoughts in our minds that somebody has done us wrong, mistreated us, then we can't let the power of spirit come in and bless us and cleanse us and give us those things that we think we want. Because we're too busy thinking about what somebody else did to us.
Yeah, but suppose you just have a nice now moment and you're just not thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the same difference.
It is. It's gone then. For whatever time that you've turned it loose, you can pick it back up. That's right. And you can always pick it back up. And it works both ways. That's what he said earlier in the chapter when he said, we can always stop thinking those thoughts. When he was talking about secondary thoughts, the secondary mind begins to think. And then the only thing that we have to do is stop thinking those thoughts and think about God. And who is it? Joel Goldsmith? No, Ernest Holmes? No, the third one, Emmett Fox, that says the golden key, the answer to everything is think about God. How do you fix it? Think about God. Because then you are in the now moment. So if you wonder why you're not spiritually illumined, if you wonder why you're not abundant, it's because there's not any room in your mind for those things because you're thinking about something else. And when you take up the space in your mind thinking about what somebody owes you or what they've done to you or how terrible something is, then there's no room for those spiritual truths to get in. But they're knocking on the door waiting. They're ready to come in. But the thoughts bring fruit according to the seed planted in the mind. And unless, and this was the other thing that Jenny and I were talking about, is we said, the primary cause is God. God is all. And divine mind thinks the primary thought. The primary thought then takes on an ego, begins thinking those secondary thoughts. They have no permanence. And the only thing that we can build that is permanent in our lives is good, is thoughts that come straight from the divine. When we're in line with divine mind, then we're building our good and it is permanent. And all of the rest of that mess is impermanent. All of that drama, all of that negativity that we tend to build in our minds and in our lives is impermanent. It's going to go away because the only thing there is God, the good. That's where all the power is. That's the only thing there is. Now, all of those other things have a very, very short shelf life. They may feel like a long time to us, but there's no permanence in them. They're going to go away. And he says that thoughts are alive and endowed by the thinker with a secondary thinking power. So The original thinker is God. God thinks us into existence. We think thoughts that assume an ego and begin to think on their own. And those thoughts that we think only have the power that we give them. So there's nothing to them. They're nebulous. There's no permanence there. He asked, why should we trust rather than distrust people? And that's that duality again. You can't love and trust God if you hate and distrust others. There's no room for both there. They can't both be present in your mind at the same time. So when we entertain one thought, the other thought is absent. So
When they can't harm you, they can do no one can harm you.
that is correct.
And all of that fear that you're going to get mugged or raped or whatever, that takes your love and your trust and puts it in the back seat, and then you've got your fear, and that shit can do a dance. But if you approach with love, you cannot be harmed. Even if you're killed, you can't be harmed.
That's exactly right, because the essence of you cannot be harmed. Yeah, what were you saying, Jenny?
I was gonna say, you'll always look for things to justify whatever perspective you have. So if you see them in a negative perspective, that's what you're gonna look for and find. And if you see them with the loving forgiveness, that's what you're gonna look for to justify your perspective.
Exactly right. And that works with the I'm going to be mugged or shot or killed or whatever.
Right.
If you're looking for those things and you're constantly looking for it, you're going to see it whether it's there or not. And
It's a mind manifest after.
they do. And it could be shadows that you're looking at. But even if something did try to harm you, it actually cannot. And so why not look for that good? Why not see the good in people? Because chances are when you see it, they're gonna raise themselves up to the bar that you set for them. So when we trust other people and use that power that we get from the act of trusting, from the act of believing in someone else, from the act of loving them, we get power. And when we use that, then we're able to trust God, because we can't trust God if we don't trust others. We can say we do, but we don't, because if we trusted God, we would trust others, because we would realize that we can't be harmed.
If we had the vision to see them correctly, we
Mhm.
wouldn't have any problem with it.
Exactly.
If we had the vision, just see the truth, and that's not your identity.
And if
That's
we,
what you are.
yes, and if we believe that the light of God surrounds us, the love of God enfolds us, the power of God protects us, and the presence of God watches over us, if we truly believed what we say every Sunday, then we would trust everybody.
Can't trust myself.
I think of Karen, that time she's coming home. Her daughter said that prayer on the way home from, wherever she was.
It was a
Mississippi,
terrible snowstorm,
yes.
people were going off the road and everything. And she just kept saying and driving, and, when she got home, was like, "What?"
Well, and if you're focusing on that, chances are you will, and you believe it.
And, he said that he was jogging in Central Park. Do you remember that story?
Mm-mm.
He was jogging in Central Park and this mugger came up. And he was getting ready to take everything he had. And I know Vincent Peale said, "I bless you." And the man was shocked. You know, most people don't say. The man was shocked, and he just looked at him and he turned around and walked off. And that would be difficult to do. with
It would
somebody
be.
getting ready to mug you.
If you don't have trust, absolutely. But if you have trust, well, he says there's magic in it. It works wonders. Love and trust are dynamic, vital powers. And when we have those things, it is magic.
It's still not gonna go perfect.
I'm sorry.
They still like you, whatever. They
Sure.
do. It will change, not.
No. No. He says, is there any such thing as debt in truth?
Debt and truth.
Debt, yeah, in truth, in reality, is there any such thing as debt?
Just love.
Yeah, the only thing that we owe or that is owed to us is love. And we can't judge others in regard to their guilt or innocence because it's not ours to do. And two, it doesn't do any good except have this mental exercise that's taken up room in our minds. Excuse me. So we have to begin to reform ourselves. We have to repent. We have to change our minds. I love the word repent now. I used to hate it, and I have reclaimed it, and I love the word repent. And it's so refreshing because we can do it over and over and over again. Just change your mind. Just think right. But when we only know ourselves superficially, when we just think of ourselves as an external personality, and we think we're good because we've conformed to moral and government laws, then we haven't done anything. Then when we're like that, we look at others and say, oh yeah, but you aren't, you're breaking the law and you're not doing what you're supposed to do. So we judge them. But what we have to do is realize that morality is not what we should be focusing on. Because when we get ourselves right with the Lord, with the law, then that's going to come as a byproduct. That morality and that law abiding is all a byproduct of being in line with our true spiritual selves.
And it wasn't that long ago that the law said just abuse people of color, women.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and that was the law, and you could follow the law and be just and right in having done that. But if you had followed love and your heart and your spirit and your mind and your God mind,
Mm-hmm.
you never would have conformed to those laws.
No, but so many did because they were morally right.
Mm-hmm.
They were
Yeah.
doing what was right. And
Lawfully right.
yeah,
Lawfully.
well, and at the time that was looked at as morally right because because of the mores of the time, that was moral. Owning slaves.
Gandhi saw it, and he didn't think it was moral,
Mm-hmm.
and he went to that higher plane. So you have to listen to your real.
Yeah. He says, when we
Yeah.
look on others who do not conform to our ideas of morality and religion as being sinners and transgressors, then we're falling short of the mark. Because it doesn't matter what we think or what society thinks is right or wrong. It matters what the law, the spiritual law, thinks is right and wrong.
And what is that to thee? Follow thou me.
Exactly. And in order to do that, we have to be forgiving. Because through forgiveness, we cleanse our minds so that we can be forgiven. Because the only unforgiveness is being held by us, for us and for others. What is a sure way of getting and staying out of debt? He says, what is a sure way of getting and staying out of debt? He says that debts exist in the mind and that's the proper place to liquidate them. Excuse me. And they have to be abolished in mind before the outer manifestation is going to stay away.
That is a contradiction of the universe.
It very much is, because there's no such thing. Because we're not owed and we don't owe and we don't own anything. personally, everything is owned in common because everything there is substance, is universal substance. And universal substance belongs to everyone and can never be used up. But we have limited things. We have this finite thing and it belongs to me, and this finite thing and it belongs to you. And we've made these false rules about what things are and said there's limits, and decided that this gem is worth more than this gem, and this piece of rock is worth more than this piece of rock.
That you can even own a piece of rock or land.
Right. Right. But we dug this up and we didn't find many of these. So these shells are real beautiful and they're worth a lot more than these common shells over here. And so we're gonna make them be worth more, and then we'll trade for things, and that's all just this thing that we created and made up, and then everybody lived by it and said, okay, sounds good to me. When all of those things are just those ideas that pass away, those things that have no permanence, and we don't think about the things that are permanent, that spiritual substance that can never go away. And we're busy trying to get this shiny gold color rock instead of this brown one that's, not worth as much. Right. So he says, why is forgiveness a good method of bill collecting? And that's because until we forgive our debts, we're not going to be forgiven. And until we forgive those who owe us, who we think owe us something, they're not going to be able to give it back to us because we're putting limits on ourselves and on them. So we have to forgive all of those error thoughts, those error states of mind, so that we'll be open to the abundance that's there. He says the idea of abundance brings its fruits into our lives if we let the law of plenty work itself out in us and in our affairs. Because the law of plenty says that there is spiritual substance that is never ending, that's never going to go away. But we keep forgetting that and saying, well, there are limits. There are more questions in this chapter, but we don't have time for them tonight, but they are really good. So read them yourselves, study them. And I am going to bless you with Romans 13, 7 through 10 tonight, which is very interesting. So this is what Paul wrote to the Romans. He said, pay to all what is due them. Taxes to whom taxes are due, revenue to whom revenue is due, respect to whom respect is due, and honor to whom honor is due. Owe no one anything except to love one another. For the one who loves another has fulfilled the law. The commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not commit murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet, and any other commandment are summed up in this word: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no wrong to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfilling of the law. And with that, I wish you a good night, and I love you all.